My mother's handwriting was small and slanted, the kind of cursive they don't teach anymore. I used to trace it on old brokerage statements when I was 12, not understanding what a trust corpus was, only that she'd written, "For Elena, when she's ready," in the margin, like a note tucked into a lunchbox. I didn't think about that handwriting again until 18 months after she died, sitting across from my father at a diner, watching him stir sugar into coffee he didn't used to take sweet. "The market's been brutal," he said. "You've seen the news." I had seen the news. I hadn't seen the account. He'd found a financial advisor within 3 months of the funeral, a man named Carl who wore a signet ring and called my father Champ. I told myself grief makes people reach for anyone who sounds certain. I told myself a lot of things that spring. The first time I asked about the account, I did it gently, the way you ask a wound if it hurts. "Dad, I just want to understand where things stand." Mom set some of this up for me specifically. His face did something I recognized from childhood. Not anger exactly, but the flattening that came before anger, like a lake going still before wind hits it. "You're not thinking straight right now. None of us are." So I stopped thinking about it. Or I tried to. That's the part I still can't fully forgive myself for. Not the years of silence after, but those months where I let "you're not thinking straight" stand in for an answer. Because I didn't want to be the daughter who audits her father's mourning. It wasn't suspicion that broke it open. It was a clerical error. I'd gone to the bank to close out one of my mother's smaller accounts. Paperwork, nothing more. And a teller, new, unfamiliar with which documents belonged to which file, handed me a transaction history I hadn't asked for. I almost gave it back. I don't know why I didn't. 3 wire transfers. Dated February. My father didn't mention the crash until April. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot for 11 minutes before I could make my hands work the phone. I didn't call him. I called a forensic accountant named Priya Osei, whose name I'd found 8 months earlier during one of those 2 a.m. spirals where you research things you're not ready to act on. I'd saved her number and told myself it was just in case. It took her 4 months. She was slow and specific in a way that made me trust her. She didn't promise outcomes, only documentation. She pulled wire records, brokerage statements, the original trust language my mother had filed with a lawyer 20 years earlier. She built something my father's smirk couldn't survive, though I didn't know that yet. I saw him twice during those 4 months. Once at a cousin's wedding, where he introduced me to Carl again like we hadn't met, and once at the cemetery on my mother's birthday, where we stood 6 feet apart not looking at each other, both of us performing grief for an audience of nobody. The court date came in October. My father wore the navy suit he'd worn to my college graduation. He looked, if anything, relaxed. I understood later that this wasn't arrogance exactly. It was the specific complacency of a man who had never once in his life been made to account for anything. He'd smoothed over smaller things before. A car accident he blamed on someone else. A business partnership that dissolved under circumstances nobody in the family discussed. He assumed this would go the same way, that I would cry, that the judge would see a grieving daughter and a grieving father and split some difference. That money, like everything else, would eventually just get quiet again. The stock market crashed. He said to me in the hallway outside the courtroom, not even bothering to lower his voice, "There's nothing left to argue about, Elena." I didn't answer him. I'd learned, somewhere in those 4 months, that silence cost him more than anything I could say. Priya was called to testify in the afternoon. She spoke the way she always did, flat, procedural, unhurried. She opened her briefcase and began laying out exhibits. Wire confirmations dated February 14th through February 28th, each one preceding the market downturn. My father had built his entire defense around by nearly 6 weeks. I watched the judge's face while she talked. He wasn't a demonstrative man. But when Priya reached the 3rd exhibit, the trust document itself, my mother's signature notarized beside language that named me, specifically, as sole beneficiary of the accounts in question, he stopped writing. He asked her to repeat the transfer dates. He asked to see the original document again, this time holding it longer than procedure required. "Counsel," he said finally, to my father's attorney, "I'd like these resubmitted formally for the record." It wasn't dramatic. Nobody gasped. But something in the room's temperature changed. The way it does when everyone quietly understands the story just shifted under their feet. My father's attorney's jaw tightened. My father himself didn't move at all, which was somehow worse than if he had. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to say I did, because that's the ending people want. The smirk wiped clean, some cosmic ledger balanced. What I actually felt, watching my father's face lose its certainty in real time, was grief, not for the money. For the version of him that could have just told me the truth 18 months earlier, that could have handed me my mother's letter and let me be angry, and then, eventually, not angry, instead of making me build a case against him, with a stranger's help. the recovery took another few months. Mediated settlements, revised filings, Carl's name disappearing from every subsequent document like he'd never existed. I got the money. I want to be honest that it mattered, that I'm not going to pretend it didn't. I saw my father once more, in a parking lot outside the courthouse annex, signing the last of the paperwork. He didn't apologize. I didn't ask him to. We stood there for a moment, two people who used to know each other. And then he got in his car and I got in mine, and neither of us called the other for a long time after. I still have the old brokerage statement, the one with my mother's handwriting in the margin. For Elena, when she's ready, I think about how she couldn't have known what ready would end up meaning. I think about it more than I think about the money. I don't know if I'll call him. Some days I think I will. Most days I just sit with the not knowing, which is its own kind of inheritance.